Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I am so excited to finally be sharing this beautiful set of watercolors from Magello. I have been waiting for months to go ahead and film this for you guys, and I've been eagerly kind of chomping at the bit to get into this video. This is the Magello Mission White Class Watercolor Gouache Hybrid Paint Set, and I got this for Christmas from my mother, so thanks Mom. And it has been sitting in my room waiting for attention for quite some time as I have gotten through all the other work that I needed to do. Now this set consists of 34 colors, which is a little bit odd, but here they are listed on the back of the container here, and it shows you it all in the full strength as well as diluted, and then I believe mixed with white. Since these are a hybrid version of watercolor gouache paints, they have some really unique characteristics, and we're going to be taking a look at those today. The only other YouTuber that I have seen create content for these paints are on Miss Carrie J's channel, and I'll go ahead and put a link in the description. But other than that, there are a couple of Korean videos, but none that are in English, and I really wanted to go ahead and take a closer look and share them all with you. Just inside the box, you will go ahead and find this little elastic band that you can go ahead and put over the entirety of the box to keep everything together. And then again, like most Magello products, we have their beautiful pamphlet that is printed on a gorgeous quality paper. And it has a lot of information in this packet, although unless you read Korean, it's not going to be too helpful for you. Maybe I need to get that Google Translate app or ask my boyfriend to show me that so I can see what is going on here. I think that would be really fun to do. But in the middle of this leaflet, you're going to see all the colors in this line, and those two rows that are at the top of the page are all of the colors that are included in this set, while the bottom row, I assume, are more colors that you could add to the set but do not come included. There are a couple of interesting discrepancies here, and I think they are incorrectly printed in the pamphlet about certain colors, like permanent orange is listed as having only 2-star rating when the tube says it is 5, and the name would imply that it is a more light fast color, and it happens with a couple of the colors. So I went ahead and double checked with the tubes. Just wanted to let you know about that little discrepancy for some of the colors. Now this set, funnily enough, even though it is a gouache hybrid set, does not come with white or black. That is great for watercolors, but a little bit confusing for gouache since you use those colors so often. So what I did is I went online to eBay and found a listing for this enormous 100 milliliter tube of Mission White Class Gouache in white, and went ahead and purchased that. Now, I have never seen a tube of gouache this big before, and I was a little bit skeptical, but the price was really, really reasonable, so I went ahead and got it, and so far I haven't been disappointed, although I haven't used the set a whole lot. Also in this pamphlet, you'll find some information about how to use them as watercolors and how to use them as gouache by adding white or black. Now this next spread was really interesting, and I did a lot of research and gave it a lot of thought before setting up my own palette. At first, I thought this page was indicating that you should fill the wells half full with color and leave the other half blank. However, after finding some of those videos that I couldn't understand what they were speaking in the videos, I did see them adding white to the wells, so doing half color and half white. And I imagine that in a gouache setup, this would be actually really, really helpful and quite ingenious actually, since usually you're adding white to add opacity to your colors. So here on the left side, I believe what they are doing is suggesting that you fill the main palette with all of the colors that you would be using as watercolors, and then using an insert from one of their fusion palettes, since those are removable, it looks like they're asking you to add a whole nother palette with the same colors, but dividing them with white on the other side. On the right side, they're suggesting you do the opposite, so if you're going to mainly use these as gouache, doing the white and color combo on the bottom, and then using the insert to go ahead and put all the pure colors in. After thinking a lot about it, I did decide to go with this version of the Bulletproof glass palette, although it has a very confusing name because I doubt that this is bulletproof and it's definitely not glass. This is plastic, but I believe it's supposed to be a plastic that is less staining than other versions. It has a slightly different layout than the one that was shown in the palette, but it does have 34 wells, although you'll see in a little bit the other conundrum that I had with the number of wells in this palette. So here I am just showing you, continuing to move through the box. We lift off that little linen piece of fabric that's in there, and the paints come stacked very neatly in two very heavy-duty plastic trays. Now these trays nest into each other, and they are very, very strong and durable. You can even hold one end of them and let the other end go completely free, and they are not going to fall or bend in any way, and you don't have to worry about them tipping over. So basically, it just gives you a lot of options based on whether or not you want to keep these all flat in the box or if you want to stack them and make a smaller footprint. Now here is where you're going to start seeing me have a little bit of trouble trying to figure out the organization of this palette. There are exactly enough wells for how many colors that are in this set. However, I intend to use this as a gouache palette, or at the very least a hybrid gouache palette, so I want to make sure I have room for white and black. And since there isn't enough room in this palette to add white and black without adding it to the main mixing area, I did do a little bit of creative thinking here. What I ultimately decided is that I was going to keep the two corner wells in the lid of this box open for the white paint, and then I was going to leave the last well on the bottom portion open for my Holbein primary black gouache. In order to do this, I would have to remove 3 colors, and that actually turned out to be a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Typically, as most of you guys know, I do not like bright greens, oranges, and pinks, and they're usually the first to get cut from my palette selection. And although that is what happened here, it wasn't an easy decision because I actually did want to force myself to become more familiar with these colors and to use them more often. So ultimately, what I decided to do was to pull colors that I thought either had an equivalent in the set already or that were really easy to mix. So first up here is the yellow green, which is made from 2 pigments I already have on the palette and can mix if I need it. There was an orange that was in a similar boat. Orange is typically pretty easy to mix from yellows and reds. And then finally, the last one that actually was really, really difficult was one of the 2 bright pinks in this palette. It actually is a hue that I like better than the bright pink opera color that I left in the palette, but it had more pigments in it and was going to probably provide a little bit less mixing options, so I did decide to pull that one. But again, it wasn't an easy decision, and I will probably add little dollops of these here and there on my mixing areas in the future so that I can get to know those colors a little bit better. This next segment here is going to be the part of the video that I know a lot of you have been waiting for. It is getting to set up the palette, and this is my favorite part. It's when we get to put out all the paint into the wells, and it's a nice new fresh start. And for those of you who like watching palette fills as much as I do, I'm just going to go ahead and put on some music. You can sit back, relax, and enjoy the footage. I'll be back in a few moments to talk about some more information and to do a little bit of a demo painting for you guys. If you don't want to watch the palette, you can just go ahead and skip on forward, and I'll see you in a few moments. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I just wanted to pop in here with the last color for Sepia, and I also had this issue with the cobalt blue that you probably saw earlier, that the binder separated from the pigment in these two tubes, and I had to go ahead and mix them together with a toothpick to make sure that they would paint out nicely. Both of these colors did have a little bit of trouble rewetting and had a bit of that gel-like gum arabic consistency, as one might expect from how much binder ended up in those wells, but I just wanted to explain for those of you who might not know what that was, that is what happened to those areas. With that last well with the Holbein black gouache, I did add in a couple drops of glycerin, as I do know from experience that the Holbein do not dry quite as smooth and rewettable as these Mission Golds do. Finally, I am adding the white gouache to each of those corner wells, and the reason I added two, I don't think I talked about this earlier, is so that I could have one white designated for the warm colors and one for the cool colors so that I wouldn't keep contaminating them and getting them muddy. Furthermore, they have like these angled off corners on those two wells, and I'm not really sure why that is, but I did go ahead and take advantage of this later by putting some white in the back of one of those wells and having that be like the pure white when I need highlights or something like that to go into that isn't necessarily for mixing. Now, before we go ahead with the demonstration painting, I wanted to go ahead and show you the incredible rewet ability of these paints that I think really set them apart from other gouache. This is a plate that I put out little dots of all the paints on when I first got this set so that I could go ahead and test them out before I actually had a palette to designate them to. And I'm showing you some of the colors that are actually the hardest little blobs to rewet on this palette, and showing you how creamy and quickly they work back up. This is real-time footage so that you can kind of see that in action, and they're just so dreamy and beautiful to rewet and to work with. So if you are someone who likes working with the opacity of gouache but find that it's really difficult to rewet them or keep a standard watercolor palette with them, then this might be a really good option for you. This quality does come with a little bit of a drawback that we are going to touch on towards the end of this video, but first, in order to be able to show you that, we're going to go ahead and do this demonstration. If you've been following me on Instagram for a while, you might remember a while back when I got my Holbein gouache, I started practicing with some little dinosaur portraits, including a Parasaurolophus, which is my favorite dinosaur. And so I thought it would be fitting for one of the test paintings that I do with these Mission White class paints is to go ahead and paint a Stegosaurus. I know a lot of you guys love Stegosaurus. He's a favorite amongst dinosaur enthusiasts, and I thought it would be really fun to use some green tones to go ahead and paint him. Now, I'm using this little dot plate for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that I wanted time for my main palette to set up, and I filmed this immediately after I set up the previous footage. And secondly, I had this paint on this palette that I didn't want to waste, so I went ahead and put it to work. One of the things that I love most about starting this adventure with gouache is that it has this really freeing capability to it that you don't have in watercolor, where if you mess up or put down a wrong value or put down a wrong color even, you can paint over the top of it and fix it fairly easily. Now, it's not like acrylic paint where it's going to dry completely and that you can completely go over your mistakes without reactivating the paint below. Because this is a water-based medium similar to watercolors, the paints underneath are going to be reactivated when you touch them. So that means that you're not going to be able to perfectly lighten a dark area, so on and so forth, but you do get a little bit more of that freedom. My favorite way to work with these paints is with a small flat brush, which is kind of also fun because I don't get to use my flat brushes often in watercolor, and I find that with round brushes with the gouache type painting that I don't have as much of that loose painterly quality to it that I enjoy so much about this style. So that's just my personal preference, and I'm sure everyone has their own loves and dislikes, so be sure to let me know in the comments below if you have worked with gouache before, what you like about it, what is similar to your watercolor process, what is different. I know some people say that gouache is more similar to watercolor, and some say it's more similar to acrylic, so I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that. Now, the reason why these are hybrid paints or sold kind of in this different category is that because the pigments themselves aren't necessarily opaque like a lot of gouache would be, and you do need to add white to them if you do want them to be opaque. But you also have the ability to water them down like you would with watercolor and make these big washes. I tried to show you a little bit of both, although later in the video I do end up covering up the watercolor wash with some more opaque color on the right-hand side of the Stegosaurus's body, and that was just a personal preference for this particular painting, but you can go between the two different styles. I will say that in the watercolor applications with the translucency, it isn't quite perfect. You still see a little bit of that grittiness or graininess that you would with diluting a regular gouache, since gouache isn't meant to be diluted as heavily as watercolors, but you do have some more flexibility with it than I have found in my limited use with other gouache brands. As the title of this video suggests, this is a first impressions video. It is not a complete review. I just wanted to go ahead and show you the setup process and kind of my first impressions of these paints. Although I am working on some swatch cards and we can compare those to other gouache samples and watercolors in another video. So if you are interested in seeing that, be sure to let me know in the comments below. All right, we have finally reached the end of the video and I can finally show you what I was alluding to earlier, and that is that it seems to be that the trade-off for having these beautiful rewetting colors is that in thicker applications of the darker colors, this paint does dry with a shiny finish. And for those of you who specifically go to gouache for its matte characteristics, I did want to go ahead and mention that here. You can still photograph your work so that the shine isn't as apparent, but that could be a big drawback for a lot of you, so I wanted to go ahead and mention that. The other main drawback of these paints as compared to watercolors is that many gouache brands are not as light fast, as they are not meant to be used as the original paintings. You are supposed to reproduce work made from gouache. That's what its original purpose was for. So a lot of the colors in this line aren't as light fast, but I look forward to talking to you about that in another video where we can take a nice slow look at all the swatches as compared to other brands. So again, if that's something you're interested in seeing, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope that you enjoyed watching this video and learning a little bit more about the Mission White class watercolor paints. As always, thank you so much to my patrons, to all of you for liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel if you'd like to see more content, and hitting that bell icon if you'd like to know when new videos come out, and I will see you in the next video.